This is a short video on a mnemonic that might help you remember some polyatomic ions. Nick, the nomenclature mnemonic. This is an ostrich, but it's also known as a camel bird, which is a good thing because I use that in this mnemonic. So what is the mnemonic? Well, the mnemonic is kind of a strange sentence. Nick the camel bird ate the Itsy clam for supper in Phoenix. So what does this mean? Well, let's start with the first word. Nick starts with N, and it has 3 consonants and 1 vowel. And it stands for the nitrate ion, because Nick ate the Itsy clam. This mnemonic will tell you the formulas for the 8 ions. So in this case, we have the nitrate ion, starts with N, just like Nick. It has 3 consonants. Nitrate has 3 oxygen atoms. It has 1 vowel, and nitrate has a -1 charge. By looking at the polyatomic ions, you might have noticed that the ite form of an anion has 1 fewer oxygens than the 8 form. So from nitrate, we can get the formula for nitrite ion pretty easily. It's NO2 minus. It's going to have the same charge as the 8, just 1 less oxygen. All right, next word is camel. Starts with a C, as does carbonate. Camel has 3 consonants, 3 oxygen atoms in carbonate, 2 vowels, which means that carbonate has a -2 charge. There is no such thing as carbonite unless you are in Star Wars, but we're not. So there is no carbonite, but there is an atom called hydrogen carbonate. Hydrogen carbonate is just the addition of an H+ ion to carbonate. Now H+ has a +1 charge, carbonate has a -2 charge, and so you have to add those together, and we end up with hydrogen carbonate having a -1 charge. Next word is bird. Bird begins with B, and this isn't the formula for the borate ion. It wouldn't work for borate, but there's an R in bird, and so bird stands for bromate ion. Bird has 3 consonants. Bromate has 3 oxygen atoms. It has 1 vowel, and bromate has a -1 charge. There is a bromite ion, which has 1 fewer oxygen than the bromate ion. Next, Itsy. Nick the camel bird ate the Itsy clam for supper in Phoenix. Itsy starts with I, as does iodate. The iodate ion has 3 oxygens, and Itsy has 3 consonants. Now remember, the vowels are only A, E, I, O, and U. We're not using Y as a vowel in this case. Itsy has 3 consonants, has 3 oxygen atoms, 1 vowel, a -1 charge. Iodate has a counterpart, iodite, same charge, same formula, except for 1 fewer oxygen ion or atom. Clam. Clam stands for chlorate. Clam has 3 consonants. Chlorate has 3 oxygens. 1 vowel, meaning a -1 charge. Chlorate has a counterpart, chlorite, has 1 fewer oxygen and the same charge. Supper. Supper starts with S and stands for the sulfate ion. There are 4 consonants in supper and 2 vowels. Sulfate has 4 oxygens and a -2 charge. There is also a sulfite ion, same charge as sulfate, 1 fewer oxygen. And there is a hydrogen sulfate ion, and there's actually a hydrogen sulfate ion, but remember, when you add hydrogen to an ion, you're adding hydrogen ion. Hydrogen ion has a +1 charge, so you have to add it to whatever charge the ion has. In this case, it is -2 plus 1 is equal to -1. So hydrogen sulfate has a -1 charge. Phoenix. Phoenix starts with P, and so does phosphate. Phoenix, the word, has 4 consonants. Phosphate, the ion, has 4 oxygen atoms. There are 3 vowels, and phosphate has a -3 charge. Phosphite, same charge as phosphate, 1 fewer oxygen. Let's look at some of these rules we talked about. If an anion has a suffix of "ite," it just means it has 1 fewer oxygen than the 8 version, but has the same charge. Now, let's look at a couple other things. If we have a prefix of "per," that means it has 1 more oxygen than the 8 ion that corresponds with it. It has the same charge. If we have a prefix of "hypo," it has 1 fewer oxygen than the "ite" form that it corresponds with, but it also has the same charge. And then when we have an ion that starts with hydrogen, we're going to add a hydrogen ion to that ion and adjust the charge accordingly. Now, we can summarize all this in a chart, and that's shown on the next slide. So here's a chart. It's kind of busy. Let me just go through it. Here is the mnemonic down at the bottom. Nick the camel bird ate the Itsy clam for supper in Phoenix. And at the top of this chart, we have a list of the words. Underneath them is the number of vowels and the number of consonants. And then we have some formulas. Now, the row in the light orange there is the one that contains the formulas that are given directly by the mnemonic: nitrate, carbonate, bromate, iodate, chlorate, sulfate, and phosphate. Now, from bromate, from many of them, we can also get an ite form. So we have nitrate and nitrite, bromate, bromite, and so on and so forth. We can also get the perbromate. It's going to have 1 more oxygen than the bromate. Periodate has 1 more oxygen than the iodate. Perchlorate has 1 more oxygen than the chlorate. Hypobromite has 1 fewer oxygen than bromite, hypoiodite, and hypochlorite. And also we get the hydrogen ions that we have to remember. So we have hydrogen carbonate, it's just an H plus carbonate, and hydrogen sulfate is H plus sulfate. So if you're in my Chem 130 class, there's only 8 other polyatomic ions that you have to memorize than those that are listed in this chart. Those are cyanide, acetate, permanganate, chromate, hydroxide, oxalate, thiocyanate, and ammonium ion. One last thing to help you remember charges, and this works for most of the ions that we're talking about. There is one exception, and I'll go into that in a minute. But for bromine, iodine, chlorine, sulfur, and phosphorus, the ions that we have to memorize in this class all have the same charge as the monoatomic ion. So, for example, bromide has a -1 charge. All of the polyatomic ions that contain bromine have a -1 charge. Phosphorus has, phosphide ion has a -3 charge, and all of the polyatomic ions that contain phosphorus also have a -3 charge. The only one that this doesn't hold true for is nitrate and nitrite. They both have a -1 charge, while nitride, N-3, has a -3 charge. Hope this helps.